Ahoy, and welcome in to another mind expanding episode of Not Allowed to Die, your podcast about mental health, where I, Dan Megler, social worker and life enthusiast, answer your questions about mental health. As always, I am with Mariska, the three-toothed Patterdale Terrier, and she is currently licking her paws. We just went for a walk on a beautiful day, and you'd think, why should she need to lick her paws? And the answer is clear because you haven't all been rating and reviewing and telling a friend. And today, you're going to really want to tell your friends because we have what Mariska loves the most. We have a guest. But before we go into that, I do have to remember, because Mariska was talking to me earlier about this, to remember that we have Pause for Patrick that we're always wanting to draw attention to. So if you know a young person who might benefit from an emotional support animal, remember to send them to pauseforpatrick.org, where they can get paired with a wish granter who will help them connect with an animal or get a letter so that they can have their animal in their dwelling. So back to today and why Mariska is so excited. Because in our time, we've talked a lot about different things that can lead to mental health struggles. And one of the things that I have noticed is adoption can be an area that can leave a hole inside of people. And so I've been really wanting to get a guest on the podcast who can shed a little light onto what their experience with adoption is like and how it's impacted their mental health. Dallas Goodlet is a person who is adopted, and he never felt like he had family to help him deal with life. He went through intense emotional pain, anger, shame, suicidal thoughts, and suffered from severe alcohol and drug addiction. And he's willing to tell us his story today about how his adoption was impacting those things and how he overcame it. So, Dallas, we are so happy to have you here today. And would you mind sharing a little bit of your story and what brings you to this point in your life?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, for having me. Just kind of story was I found out I was adopted at 5 years old. Uh, my mom sat me down and talked with me and let me know who they adopted me from. So I thought for my whole life I knew who my biological parents were. Even with knowing that, I still felt, like I never had a tribe. I never had my own family. I never really felt loved. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. With all that came a lot of, just pain and anger and just, shame. I didn't love myself really because, again, I felt like nobody else really loved me. And that just led to a lot of problems. So, from about 5 years old to about 19, going to school, just getting in a lot of trouble. That's kind of where I first discovered, cigarettes and smoking pot and drinking at a young age, at about 15. It just led to a lot of trouble. Got suspended a lot out of school, fighting. My parents, I'd come home and anything they'd say, I'd punch a hole in the wall. Just had very, very severe anger problems. So luckily, I played sports, so it kind of I did have an outlet. So I played football, I wrestled. So some of that anger, I did have an outlet for that. I thank God to this day. Also grew up in a church, so I had a lot of faith growing up too in God, and so all that helped. But just for a long, long time, I just had a lot of issues. And again, I think it was just from feeling that sense of abandonment was the primary cause of all that.
And it sounds like your adoptive parents wanted to try to help with that. They really loved you, but there was that piece inside of you that was saying, "I still feel like I don't fit here." Or tell me a little bit more about that as a young child. Like, and did you realize that some of the anger was connected to that feeling of adoption, or did you not realize that till a little bit later?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. No, I knew it from the get go. And that's they did everything they could. It's something that I don't know. They were very loving, and this is the only advice I ever give to any parents out there is you have to tell your adopted kid how much you love them. I mean, you have to overdo it more than you would tell your biological kid, because they already feel that sense of not being wanted, not being loved. So again, I was just telling parents out there, you really have to overcompensate for that. So they did all they could, and I just don't think that there's any more they really could have done. It's just a void, a hole that you have. And looking back, I don't know if they would have told me. If they would have told me they loved me a million times a day, I don't know if it still would have, filled that hole in my heart. I don't know if it would have or not, because, growing up, they loved me, but they were never really verbal about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that could have contributed to that. I don't know. I just know that had they said it more often and made me feel that way, it may have helped, but then again, it may not have. So, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if there's anything more they really could have done to fill that. It's tough.
Well, I don't think our society does a good job of telling adoptive parents how common it is for people who are adopted to have that hole inside. I think they think if they just show up and they love their child, then that'll be enough. And I don't think that they get a lot of preparation for the fact that this child might need a little bit more than a biological child of the family. And that's not because the adoptive parent isn't doing a great job. That's just because when you feel like the person who's supposed to love you most in the world gives you away, it makes children feel like there must be something wrong with them. Is that a
Right.
feeling that you had? Do you feel like you felt like you were flawed in some way, and that's why you were given up for adoption? Or
Oh, for sure. Because you think like I have my daughter now. I have a daughter who's almost about to be 10, and like I couldn't imagine, no matter what was going on with me, why I would ever give her up for adoption. So, as you grow older, you tend to understand more, and maybe there are some reasons for it that are legitimized. But yeah, growing up, I just thought, how on earth could you do this to me? So yeah, if my own mom doesn't love me, well, who does? So it's yeah, I mean that's where you start at in life. So if your own mother doesn't love you, I mean who else is going to? Friends won't. I mean they'll leave you. I felt anybody I got close to would abandon me. Again, yeah, it comes back to my mom. If she did it, why wouldn't anybody else?
so do you feel like that affected you in romantic relationships? Do you feel like you had a harder time letting down your guard and having true intimacy and connection because you felt like there was that
Yeah,
lack of self-love?
yeah, for sure. I had a hard time, growing up as an adolescent, talking to girls as it was, like most probably, young teenage boys do. But even when I first started having, my first girlfriend or two, I just thought like this isn't going to last. And it's probably opposite for most kids. They think, whoever I'm with, they think, oh, I'm going to marry this person. It's
Mhm.
it's my knight in shining armor, my queen. But for me, I thought, even at a young age, I thought this person's never going to stay with me. Number one, why would they? I have no self value for myself. And number two, again, if my mom left me, why wouldn't this, girl I'm dating? So, yeah, that lasted up until like my 30s, and even my wife now, I'm not gonna lie, it still kind of goes through my head once in a while, but not nothing like it was. I mean, that lasted up until, like I say, like 30 years old. Like
Well,
women I would date in my 20s, I thought this isn't gonna last. Why would it?
for a lot of the young people that I work with who are adopted, they go through different, as they hit different developmental stages, they feel differently about their adoption. Where some of them who feel like they were pretty okay with it at 9, 10, 11, suddenly at around 15 or 16, they have this greater desire to know more about their birth family. Now, you
Hmm.
said there was a time at which you thought certain people were your birth family, and then you realized that they weren't. That sounds like had a pretty negative impact on you to find out that the people who you thought were biologically related to you were not.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I went off the deep end. It's kind of where I had another chapter two, you could say, open up my life. Like I say, I like to tell people I feel like my life's broken up into chapters. So chapter one was about 5 to 19, and at 19 years old, I found out who I had assumed my whole life was my biological family. They were in fact not. So it's hard enough, growing up with that void, thinking at least I have closure, right? At least I have closure. I know who my biological parents are.
Mhm.
It's hard enough just with that. But at 19, I found out I was working at a Kmart one day, and who I thought my biological mom was coming to the store, gave me her phone number. I went home, talked to my dad. Told him, hey, she had come in. I don't want to see her. And he said, Dallas, that's not your biological mom. And that's when I kind of feel like I just exploded. Mentally, I just was gone. So, I had a lot of resentment towards my parents. I felt like they had lied to me. And that's kind of when I went off the deep end and started getting really, really heavily into drugs and alcohol. And, before I felt like I had no value. Well, at 19, I really felt like I was just completely worthless because now I found out, my birth mother gave me up for adoption. The second set, the family I had then, they didn't want me. And I ended up with my parents now. So I thought, like, nobody does. I mean, and then, growing up, getting in all this trouble, this is another thing. I'm trying to write an ebook right now about my life. And this is something I've reflected on was all the, I feel like my parents had buyer's remorse.
Mm.
And when I say that is because I felt like this pain of being adopted made me lash out in school, get in trouble, cause all sorts of hell at school. And then I get in trouble and then now it'd be a bigger shame to my parents. So I felt like they almost had like buyer's remorse. Here we had this kid, we adopted him, he gets in trouble nonstop. Um, so yeah, it was a bad period. That was about 19 to about 24 was just nonstop drugs and alcohol abuse, nonstop. From the time I woke up, from the time I went to bed.
So when you were younger in, say, middle school time period, did the school try to offer you counseling? Did anyone try to offer you counseling, therapy, that kind of thing? Or did they just say, boys will be boys, he'll grow out of this?
Yeah, I never got offered any counseling, and then I mean, I wouldn't even have taken it. I mean, they probably had to force me because I just had a hard head, and it was just f the world, and nobody's gonna tell me what to do. And yeah, I mean, no, nobody offered it to me. And like I say, I don't even know if I would have taken it because I just had such a bad attitude and outlook on the world. I mean, it was a horrible way to think and perceive things. I mean, I didn't have any love in my heart at all because again, I felt like nobody loved me, so nobody loves me. Well, I'm not gonna love anybody back. And it's just a horrible way to think.
Well, that we become angry because it feels more powerful to be angry than sad. And it sounds like you spent most of your childhood feeling really kind of angry and ready to kind of push things away.
Yeah,
And, and then
yeah, for sure.
you said when we were talking before, you told me that you had a bit of an epiphany experience. Do you mind talking in your, what it was, you were about like 24, 25 when you started to see things a little bit differently? Do you mind taking us through
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I got introduced to psilocybin mushrooms, and again, I don't want to glamorize these for anybody. They changed my life. At that time, again, I was about as low as I could be. The drugs, the alcohol, the negative self talk, and bad habits. And then one day, I took a pretty big dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and it changed everything just within a matter of an hour or two. So, like I told you this, and I tell other people that I feel like I went through about 20 years of therapy in about 4 hours. Um, just all the emotions, the harmful emotions, the negative self talk, all the labels. That was the biggest thing. All the labels that I put on myself were just gone. I was instead of having hate in my heart and resentment and shame, it was filled with love and forgiveness and acceptance of other people and myself too. I forgave myself that day, and that was a big thing. So it was, besides my daughter being born, it was one of the most important days of my life. It changed everything just right then and there. And how we talk to ourselves is everything. And I'm sure for most people, we talk to ourselves worse than a stranger would on the street. And I talk to myself, I mean, just as bad as you could talk to yourself. So yeah, that was a very impactful moment, impactful day, and it totally changed everything. And it made me realize that a few things, our perspective is everything. I like tell my daughter, I teach her this all the time, is the world's not as it is, the world is as we see it. So my view changed on the world, my view changed on myself, my view changed on my parents, everything. So yeah, that day I kind of sobered up a little bit, went home, and my parents and we haven't had a fight since, and that's been 16, 17 years ago. We haven't even really argued since then. It just changed everything. I started helping them around the house more. It's kind of a funny thing. I went home that day or that next night or whatever it was, and started helping them clean the house. And yeah, they looked at me like, there was a stranger in the house. They didn't even know who it was. But it was forgiveness, and it was giving people the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, because I had a lot of anger towards them for a long time, assuming that they had lied to me about who my birth parents were, when in fact, that's how they were advised through the court counselors at that time. They were told, hey, unless your kid brings up, the adoption, you kind of just give them the basics. And then when your kid's ready, you can get into more details. Well, I never wanted to talk about it. I mean, again, I was ashamed. I never wanted to talk about it. So it just never got brought up. So yeah, that day, it definitely changed everything for sure.
But even then, again, so many years of filling that hole with sort of instant gratification that didn't magically disappear overnight. So things, in addition, like drugs and alcohol, there were also things like food or other things that you were using to fill the hole you've talked about. So did that, like after that epiphany, did you still struggle to figure out how to make a healthy way of going through your life, or did everything change with that?
Yeah, no. I mean, no, it didn't. The, how do I word this? I still drank. I still smoked pot all the time. Still ate more mushrooms, but there wasn't like this negative. I don't know how to even say this. There wasn't like a negative self hatred attached to it anymore. Now at this point in my life, I was 24. I really didn't have a career going. I was kind of just drifting through life, but I like to say I was having fun doing it. But now that I'm older, living that type of lifestyle is not fun. But at that time, you know, I was still young in my 20s and just kind of drifting through life. And I still abused substances quite a bit, but it wasn't like when I abused substances earlier, it was really wanting to kill myself because, you know, I grew up in church. I know to me, suicide is the ultimate sin. You're taking your life that was given to you. I could never do that, but I was like subconsciously, I believe, wanting to die through drugs and alcohol. So after that episode with the mushrooms, yeah, I still drank and smoked pot every day, but it wasn't to the extent it was earlier. I'll say that.
When it sounds like it was a shift from doing it in a medicinal way or a self-destructive way to doing it more in a recreational way of this is just how my life is operating. And so,
Right.
but now you've kind of, you've found a different way of kind of filling things. Do you mind talking at all about, you know, the walking and the things that
Yeah.
what's worked for you about finding a different way to fill some of that hole and get your endorphins in a different mindset?
Yeah, sure. So right now, I mean, I'm 100% sober. I mean, I don't even have caffeine in my system. No coffee, no marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes. I mean, nothing. I don't even take vitamins. So I'm 100% sober now. And I think what's got me there was when I was about 20, probably 28. Tell you a long story short, me and a buddy went to Canada, and my best friend, and he liked to walk. You know, we walked. I mean, every day, all day. About drove me crazy. So yeah, one night we about got in a fight because I wanted to get a cab and he didn't want to get a cab, and we walked like it was probably 15 miles that day, and I was so mad. We about got in a fist fight, and he ended up leaving me there at a bar, and I was sitting there and you know, pretty drunk at that time, and it was like something hit me there, and it was a kind of a thought: life happens to you or for you. And at that time, life was happening to me. I didn't want to walk anymore, so I had this kind of epiphany there that, you know, hey, let's turn this into a good situation. So ended up walking back to the hotel that night, and then the next day I woke up and I went on like another 6 mile walk, and I felt like better than I ever had. And since then, I've been on like a 12-year journey of walking just nonstop. I walk about 5 miles minimum every single day. My record, I walked 30 miles in one day. That was coming off a fast. And walking has changed me just because you get out and you're out inside nature and you have time to collect your thoughts. You have time to straighten out any thoughts that are going through your head. You know, not to mention the weight loss that you can get through that too. But the biggest thing I find, and I actually read this in a book this weekend. It's called Dopamine Nation. Have you ever heard of this book?
No.
Well, Anna Lemke's the author. She's a doctor, and she's got a book called Dopamine Nation. And I would recommend this book to anybody out there who's struggling with food, screen time, drugs, alcohol. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever is hitting dopamine in your brain, this book will be for you. So anyway, I was reading it, and it's something called self-binding. And self-binding is a way you can like get away from any type of thing that's plaguing you, any type of addiction. And there's three things in there. One of them is called physical self-binding. And what that does is she talks about setting up a physical barrier between you and your vice. So when you go out and walk, you are literally setting up a barrier between you and your vices. You know, if it's cigarettes, like I quit cigarettes by taking long walks in nature because I didn't have any cigarettes with me. And, you know, cigarettes aren't just going to pop out of the tree and I start smoking. So, you know, I set up a barrier for 7, 8 hours a day. You know, I go on these walks. So not only am I getting all the benefits of walking, nature, being outside, the sunlight, the vitamin D, I'm also getting that benefit of abstaining from that vice. And you can, like I say, if it's alcohol, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, alcohol, it doesn't matter. You just don't take these things with you. You go on long walks. And I swear, I mean, I promise about anybody, you'll quit about any vice that's plaguing you. You'll just get away from it long enough. You can't have it, you know? So like when I go on these long walks, sometimes I lived in a downtown area in Kansas City. I go on these long walks through the city. And the only discipline I really had to have at that time was, you know, don't pick a cigarette butt off the ground or, you know, bum one from somebody. So I'm like, if I can just do that, which, you know, I'm not going to smoke off the ground. It's disgusting. But if I can just get by, not ask anybody for a cigarette, I can go, you know, a third of the day and not smoke. Well, I did that for probably about a month or so, and I just had no desire to smoke cigarettes anymore. So, yeah, it works for me like food, anything. You get that urge, get out of the house and go walk and just come back later. And I guarantee you that urge will pass.
When we know that if we can just delay gratification, and particularly the research on self-injury says that sometimes if we can delay gratification for just 8 seconds between the
Mm,
desire to do it and that, then other thoughts and other options may present themselves. And giving that longer period of time, I know for myself, when I even just take Mariska for a walk, I get all my best, coolest ideas when
oh
I've
yeah.
left everything else away. And I'm, often when I'm walking, I'll be listening to a podcast or music or whatnot. But when I have a moment where it's silent, and I just let those other thoughts in. And walking, I
Mm,
think, helps stimulate that. And the great thing about walking is it's free. So as
right.
long as you're a person who is in good enough physical health to do it, and for those who are not in great physical health, starting small. Would you, for any other tips that you recommend about before going out? Do you ever research where you want to go, or you just say, "Hey, I just kind of let the mood strike me"?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like just getting lost. Like there's times that my phone on me, thank goodness I have my GPS on me. But yeah, there's times some of my best walks and my most memorable ones are the ones where I just get lost. And the good thing about walking is, I mean, there's so many life metaphors you can get on walking, but one of the ones I like is you can't, like when you go out on a walk, let's say you walk out 5 miles and you're like, okay, I gotta go home. Like you can't quit. Like you can't just roll on the ground, and you have to get home. So it's like other things in life. Like I can't quit this. I have to keep going one step at a time, and you'll make it home. So unless you call an Uber or something like that. But even then, if you don't bring a phone, I mean, you have to find your way. You have to find your way home somehow. And again, it's just like that metaphor. Like I got to find my way home, and whether that is something internally, what you want to call home inside your mind, or whatever it is, you got to find your way back to yourself. So, hey man, real quick though on that creativity part,
Hmm.
like Steve Jobs, I don't know if anybody's, if you know much about him, but he swore by walks. He said all of his most creative ideas when he was working at Apple came on long walks. Uh, some of our finer writers in life and philosophers, Shakespeare, I think he went on long walks. Marcus Aurelius went on long walks. A lot of people do, and they swear by it, just, from the creative stance too. So even if you're in business, like get out and take a walk. You have some of your best ideas come to you.
Right, or walking with someone like as a meeting, like having these walking meetings can help stimulate
Mm-hmm.
that creativity. In addition, I try to tell my kids that boredom. So let's say you get bored. Boredom is your creativity engine, and often in our society today, we don't leave enough space for boredom, so our ideas can't percolate. They can't grow up around them. Now, I'm curious for you. Did which started first? Did the walking start first, or did this desire to take your pain and your experience and go help others? Or like how did that synthesis happen? Because now, and tell me a little bit about this. You've kind of dedicated your life to wanting to help others to not have to suffer from some of the things that you suffered from.
Yeah, correct. So I mean, walking, it kind of started. That was, like I said, it's about 12 years ago now. It's when I started really getting into walking. So that definitely came first, and then since then, like I had my daughter when, like I say, I was 30, and that really cut down on like I've been intoxicated twice in 10 years now. I don't drink at all anymore, but in that 10-year span, I was intoxicated twice after I had my daughter because I had a new purpose in life. Had my first, real blood that I know. She's still the only blood I know. Um, so that started that, and then the last kind of, I'd say last year and a half, I kind of feel like I found my personal purpose in life, and that's to write, is to become, the best version of myself, somebody I would admire, somebody I would have admired 10 years ago. Like I want to be that guy now, somebody who's sober, somebody who's a good family man, somebody who, exercises, eats right, just somebody who I'd want to be. Everything that messed me up and plagued my life, I want to reverse that, become the man I want to be, which I'm slowly doing that now. And then, yeah, I want to help others and give that person away to the world. And yeah, just time collapsed the pain for people because, like, I went through, I'd say 25 years. When I started at 15, that's when the pain got real. I was really aware of it at that time, 15, like you were saying earlier, for adopted kids. So yeah, about 15 to 40, it was unnecessary. I didn't have to do it, but I didn't have anybody like me to talk to me back then. I think more and more people are accepting a sober life and making that a little more glamorous. But 10, 15 years ago, like somebody looked at, somebody was sober. I mean, they're a dork, like no, I mean, celebrities, like nobody's sober. I mean, that stuff's dorky. Nobody wants to hear that. But now more and more people, I think, are waking up to just the what alcohol and drugs do to people. And it's a dead end road. So yeah, I want to help people and just kind of give them a new mindset. And just like I say, time collapse that pain for them, and no, you don't have to live that way.
And what I get from you is this idea that a sober life can be the happiest, most joyful life that you're like, you don't sound like a person who feels like he's missing out when he looks back on the substances. Instead, you seem like you're really excited about the things that you are doing. Is that how it feels for you?
Yeah, right. It's just like, well, I'll tell you, like I went outside just a minute ago. I got in the sun, went for a bike ride, and that was a dopamine hit. So I'm looking, we all want dopamine hits. So that's what we're all looking for. But too many people chase that, and where they think it's giving them pleasure, that's where it's giving them pain.
Mhm.
So when people chase the drugs, the alcohol, and they think this is pleasurable, that gives them pain. And, through exercise or doing anything else that, maybe, like, let's say I went out and ran real quick, like sprinted. It's painful for a little bit. I mean, probably nobody loves doing that, but I'm trading a fraction of pain for the rest of the day of pleasure.
Mhm.
Whereas some people will drink and do drugs and they get that pleasure for 10, 15 minutes. And the rest of their day is in pain. They're hungover, they're tired, they're, probably regrets. So we got to like flip our mindset on pleasure and pain. Like I say, I'm now I'm getting older. I'm trading a little bit of pain for a long-term pleasure. Whereas before it was just that little bit of pleasure and then I had long-term pain. So that's how I'm trying to live now. And, like I say, I feel great. Like I'll tell you real quick, I was kind of sitting around the house earlier today and, I wasn't feeling bad, but I wasn't feeling good. And then I went outside, got some sun, rode my bike. Now I feel amazing again.
When I
So,
think for me, in combining a couple things that you said, it's what I'm always telling my students is we want to imagine that healthiest version of ourselves. And for me, I know, like, I'm not a therapist and whatnot because I'm a better person than an accountant. I find that it gives me sustainable pleasure. And that most often, if we look at the things that bring us sustainable pleasure, it's eating healthier, it's doing the healthier things. When we're acting like the person we want to become, most often I'm finding that's when I like myself the most. And when I'm finding those moments when I'm not liking myself, when I'm kind of ashamed of the person that I am, I'm not doing the things that the healthiest version of me would do. So, so now for you, you are willing to do. Have you been? You've been doing some mentoring and some coaching, or tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, I've just been doing some online coaching. I've helped quite a few people out now lose weight. Again, weight was something, I didn't even talk about that a whole lot, but yeah, food was another thing I just battled with forever. My weight would fluctuate. And, you can almost tell, like, if I was doing internally well, you could, like, my body would show it. And when I wasn't doing so well on the inside, my body would show it. I gained weight. They all kind of go hand in hand, bad habits. So, yeah, I've helped out quite a few people lose weight, just kind of change their mindset. But yeah, I'm wanting to branch off into, like a niche of really just helping, youth, because that's where it all starts. That's where it all starts for anybody is, those very formative years of being an adolescent. And I feel like, yeah, if you can get on track at that young age, who knows where it'll be. Here's something else I tell people too, Daniel. Was like, if you think about this, if people didn't screw off in their 20s, and that's where most people kind of like delay their life a little bit because they're young, they're finding themselves out, they're partying. I get all that. But like, if people would seriously like focus in their 20s, you'd probably be a millionaire by the time you're 40. If you really buckled down, went to college, like did the right things, cemented the right habits, you'd be unstoppable by like mid 30s or 40s. But so many of us screw off in our 20s. And, like I say, I get it. We're, I'm find ourselves, but at the same time, like, don't screw off in your 20s. I mean, you could be a force to be reckoned with by the time you're in your upper 30s and 40s if you take stuff seriously. So,
Well, and particularly from a financial standpoint of that compound interest, that putting
oh my
money away and
gosh.
things like that is the. But I love the fact that for you, and I think why you're going to be able to speak to a lot of people is because you have the experience of having made those mistakes and saying, "Hey, I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I'm coming from a place of just wanting to save other people from, using your experiences and your wisdom to save those people from doing some of the same things." If you were talking to a parent of some adopted kids, I mean, in addition, you've said, like, express your love for your adopted kids, but is there any other advice and tips you would give to them or to that young person who is adopted, who's struggling a little bit with it? I mean, I know you're not telling them to go do psilocybin, but is there any other
Right.
things from that epiphany that you wish you could share with, like, let's say there was an angry 13-year-old who, like, he's just like you were, or she's just like you were. Is there anything for either the parents or the kids that you just kind of a perspective you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I'd say, man, for the kids, like, and I see this on Instagram a lot where it's sad, but I was the same way too. But you'll see these kids who are adopted, and it's like they take their anger out on the people who adopted them
Mhm.
and say, if it wasn't for you, like, I'd be with my birth parents. I mean, it's just like weird, this kind of strange, misguided anger towards them. And again, I had it for a while too, but like you never know how your life would be with your birth parent. Like I found out my mom was locked up in an insane asylum, and I was taken from her from the state. Um, so let's say she wasn't in an institution and she was at home and she wasn't mentally right. Like my life could have been hell. My parents I grew up with, they were great people. They raised me pretty well. I can't really complain a whole lot, other than not getting the affection I probably thought I should have got. But other than that, they were great people. Um, but yeah, I would say be appreciative. If you're adopted, be appreciative of what you have in the present time, in the present moment, because you don't know what it could be like if you were never given up for adoption. It could be hell. It could be way worse. So just be appreciative of who has adopted you. Yeah, I see that a lot. I don't know. It's kind of boggling to me, but again, I was there at a point too. Parents, yeah, I would just say, yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's kind of what I said earlier. Is just you have to overcompensate your love for your kid, and I would almost say too, be open about it. Like, don't make it weird and don't make it awkward for your kid. Like, again, for us, it was always kind of swept under the rug. Like, we want to talk about it. So it was always kind of this, elephant in the room or whatever. But yeah, I would just say as the parent, just really, really verbalize your love for your kid.
When I guess, and what from the experience I've had with so many students who are adopted is just understand that you're doing the best you can, that these kids are more likely to have that pain, that you as the adoptive parent are not failing in any way, and offering them either counseling or other vehicles to express, because many kids won't be open and available for counseling, but they might do karate. They might do, they might channeling them and getting them mentors who, might understand their pain a little bit differently. You know,
Yeah. Well, I'll say
parent,
real quick. Sorry, Daniel. I
go
would
ahead.
say, yeah, like be open to your kids. Say, is being adopted bothering you? Like, I get it if it is. Like, be open about it and let's talk about this. You don't have to be ashamed, you don't have to be embarrassed. It's understandable. So try to see from that point. And then, yeah, like you said, like I would try to get them in some type of, like I said, I grew up playing football, wrestled. So I mean, I was hell on wheels on the football field. I could have went to college and played. I tore up my knee really bad. I wouldn't have been D1 or anything, but I had some chances to go to some smaller colleges around me. But yeah, I mean, I took out a lot of anger on that football field, and it was good because if I didn't do that, I probably would have been in jail for sure.
Well, I think for parents, don't be afraid if your kid, whether they're adopted or not, but if you see that they're interested in something, don't be afraid to make an alliance with those coaches and let those coaches know, hey, my kid is struggling a little bit listening to me. They might listen to you a little bit. And if you could also guide them a little bit on that path toward being the healthiest version of themselves, because kids really do often, especially in those middle school years, they tone out their parents a little bit, but they start to
Mhm.
tune in other sources and those other mentor type figures. So as a parent, don't be hurt by the fact that your kid may push you away. That doesn't mean you're not doing an amazing job as a parent, but you just have to stay the course. And fortunately, you're an example of it. Sounds like you have a really good relationship with your adoptive parents at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship. It's kind of bad. My dad's got aggressive cancer right now.
Sorry to
So,
hear that.
well, I mean, it's part of life. So yeah, we have a very, like I say, I'm 41 now, and in 16 years, I mean, we haven't really had an argument. And I mean, I look back and sometimes I tear up just saying how like kind of mean I was to them because I just had that misguided anger towards them. But yeah, I'd say it's close to being perfect now. If you even think what a perfect relationship is, like we tell each other we love each other nonstop all the time, and it's a world, a world of difference to where it was. And like I don't want to live with that bitterness either. And people need to. That's another big lesson is like forgiveness. Like you only hurt yourself when you don't forgive somebody. You're hurting yourself. And I don't know. There's some saying I'm sure you've heard it. Something about give each other poison, and
Hmm.
we both drink or whatever. You're the one that feels it when you're bitter inside, but yeah, I mean, like learn to forgive. I mean, that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned out of all this stuff is forgiveness. It's like forgiveness for me comes so easy now. I mean, I can forgive anybody for about anything.
Hmm. But again, that going back to that childhood version of you who, when when something is off, they almost always internalize that they are the problem. And it sounds
Oh
like
yeah,
you had really felt like you were the problem. And I'm so glad that, whether for any kid, but particularly for adopted kids, we need to help them realize that they are not the problem. They are not the issue. And
right,
otherwise that will continue to show itself in trying to fill that hole with things that are not healthy.
right. Yeah, and I felt that way forever. It's just what did I do? It was my fault. I mean, I must have been the most horrible little. I mean, why would anybody do this to me? And just I'm older. Things happen, and you can't control them. It's just the way the world works. Things happen. You got to do your best to move on from those, and grieve a little bit, but eventually you got to pick the pieces up and move on. So.
Well, I appreciate so much you being willing to share your experience. If people want to find out more about you or connect with you for coaching about weight loss or sobriety or just dealing with, younger people who are dealing with anger issues or adoption stuff, where should people look to connect with you?
Yeah, just look me up on Instagram. That's kind of where I do everything at. The Instagram handles it's at the_walk_king. So
Okay.
at the walk king is what like I say, it's a play on words, walking.
Yeah,
So
I love
yeah.
it. That's fantastic. Well, again, for any of you who are listening to this, I hope you do reach out to Dallas if you think that could be beneficial. And for if you're working with people who are growing up with adoption, please help them to be compassionate to themselves and be compassionate to them as they struggle through these things. If any of you have questions for Mariska or me, remember to email us at daniel.magler@live.com. And as always, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. And remember, you are not allowed to die.